So let's welcome local author Jessica Hamilton. Jessica will be discussing her debut novel, What You Never Knew, inspired by Jessica's own family cottage in Muskoka. Told in alternating points of view between one living sister, June, and one dead, May. What You Never Knew is a story about family secrets and lives. Jessica Hamilton was born in Australia but grew up in Canada. She has lived and worked in the Czech Republic, Taiwan, India, and Japan. She studied writing at the Humber School for Writers, as well as George Brown College. She lives in Ontario with her husband, son, and daughter. What You Never Knew is her first novel, and it is available. You can order it through Manticore, Amazon, Indigo, all the places where the great books are, because it is a great book. So I will turn it over to you now, Jessica, and we will get together at the end. I'll pop back on and we'll take questions. So enjoy, everybody.
Thanks so much, Jane. Thank you to the library for inviting me to do this. It's an exciting thing for me. And thank you to everyone for coming. You'll have to bear with me a little bit because, not being in person, it feels a bit like I'm just talking to myself in my office, which feels strange. I do wish we could have done this in person, and hopefully I'll be able to come into the library at some point to do something. But I'm just glad that everyone came and that I was given this opportunity. Just starting with a little bit of my connection to Orillia. I moved here in grade 1 and I grew up here. And I only left when I went to university. And I actually didn't come back until about 2010, after I'd had my kids, and we were looking for a nice place to raise them and to get out of Toronto and that sort of place where it's harder to raise kids, more expensive for homes. And so we decided to come back to Orillia. And the reason I'm so happy to do this event tonight with the library is because the library was a very important part of my growing up in Orillia. As a kid, I used to go there all the time. I remember the big fabric stuffed snake that was on the floor in the children's area and the ramp that you ran up and down every time you went in. And as a teenager, I went there even more on my own. I went there to study and do research for school projects. And I also would go and take stacks and stacks of books out. And it was where my love for reading was really fostered, was at the library. And I still, as an adult, continue to go there and looking for books, and I take out multiple at a time. So I'll just get into a little book synopsis for those who haven't read it. So the story, and first of all, just a reminder, the book is What You Never Knew. And the story follows two sisters, May and June. At the beginning of the book, May dies suddenly in a car accident on the way home from a reading of her mother's will, and May is the older sister. She found out at the reading of the will that their family cottage on Avril Island had been left to her. This was shocking news because she had been told, as well as June, years and years ago, that the cottage had been sold. So she dies within the first few pages of the book, but her perspective continues as a ghost protagonist. So both May and June believed that the cottage had been sold by their mother years ago. It was after their very last summer there, where their father had actually abandoned them, according to their mother. He had just left in the middle of the night. And now June is the only surviving member of the family, so the cottage has been willed to her, and she travels back there to reclaim it. While there, she's reunited with a childhood friend, Ezra, and learns that her father's disappearance may be more sinister than what her mother had told her. She finds out that the family's past in the Lakeside community is full of some pretty ugly history. She finds out a lot of family secrets that growing up she was oblivious to, as kids so often are. So not only is she dealing with these shocking realizations, but there's also some pretty spooky stuff that starts happening on the island. And she feels that someone or something doesn't want her there. And her sister May is along with her throughout the book in spirit form, while they both discover what really happened the last summer that they were at Avril Island. So I was asked to speak about the inspiration for the book, and there are a few different seeds of inspiration. The first one was I was actually driving along the highway one day, and I saw some birds flying over a farmer's field, and it caught my attention, and I wasn't paying very close attention to driving, which I should have been. And I just had this sudden idea of, if I had gotten into a car accident because I was bird watching, and I thought of how angry my older sister would be at me for, not paying attention and getting myself killed on the highway. And just the idea of that, the last thought, before dying is, oh, my sister's going to be so mad at me. And so that played out in my head a little bit. And that was the first seed of the story. And I'm just going to read from the book the description of the car accident that does happen. It happens within the first 5 pages, so there's no spoiler here at all. All right, so I should put my glasses on. Once I was on the highway, moving with the flow of traffic. My grip on the steering wheel began to loosen. I had a 2-hour drive and 1 hour at home to figure out a plan before I'd see June. What would I tell her the appointment had been about? Could I lie right to her face? Could I tell her the truth? A flock of birds, black ones, I think they were crows, so then it would have been a murder of crows, very fitting, rose up from a farmer's field to the left of me, offering a quick distraction from my heavy thoughts. They looked like ink blotches on the gray sky, only their wingtips standing out with any definition. They soared upward, weightless, and swirled like a circus of acrobats, grabbing my attention, pulling it away from the road. It would have been fine if it weren't for the white van, which changed lanes too quickly, impatient with the slow driver in front of him and unaware that I was bird watching. I looked away from those fluid black spots too late. There was a wall of white, my foot on the brake, metal eating metal, glass smashing. The airbag inflated like an angry balloon, punching me in the chest and snatching my breath away. Then the spinning started. For a second, I thought I had turned into one of those black birds, free and twirling through the sky, but it was my car bouncing off the guardrail and dancing across the 4 lanes of highway. There was the sound of squealing tires, brakes trying desperately to work, then came a flash of blue and everything went dark. I was dead in an instant. I leaked out of my body and into the atmosphere just above the road. I watched as the paramedics pulled me from my car, which was crumpled in the front, curled in on itself, T-boned, I believe they call it, on the driver's side. The driver of the white van stumbled along the side of the road, refusing to be stilled. He gestured wildly at my car, called out obscenities. The driver of the blue car sat trapped in the vehicle, alive, but looking as though she might be dying on the inside. I watched it all unfold like some bad TV drama. The blackbirds continued to circle above the farmer's field, unaffected by the man-made tragedy only 100 or so feet away. One of the 3 ambulances pulled away from the gory scene, my body inside. My only thought, June's going to be so mad at me. So that just gives you a sense of, that was literally the scene that played out in my head when I was on the highway, and it's how I started the book. Another inspiration for the book was the close sister relationship. So I myself have an older sister and we are very close, and I can't imagine being in the world without her. We've been through a lot together, and so I just knew that I could write this into the book easily. It was something that I knew so well. I knew that I wanted to create 2 sister characters, and even with one who had passed away. So that was another part of the inspiration for this book. And I'm going to read another excerpt just describing May, the older sister, the first time that she met June as a baby. So this is May's perspective. I was only 2.5 when they brought June home from the hospital. I remembered it though, all through my life, vivid and clear, as though memory hadn't started to matter until the day she arrived. My mother took great efforts to settle me on the couch. She propped cushions on either side of my legs. She put a hand against my stomach and pushed me as deep into the couch as I would go. Then she placed the tightly wrapped pink bundle into my arms, and I was surprised at how heavy she felt. "This is your baby sister. This is June," my mother said softly. She pointed to herself, "April," then to me, "May." Then she pointed to the baby June. June, she paused to let the understanding sink in. The three of us are the best months of the year, she chuckled, the warm, rich sound sending happiness surging through my belly. I would come to understand much later the narcissism of our names. She was a month, and therefore the two of us must be as well. Her month starting things off, our months falling right behind. I looked down at June and she looked up at me, her eyes bottomless pools of navy. We stared at each other, our gazes unwavering while a bond made up of blood, brain waves, and particles pulled out of the atmosphere from sisterhoods that had come before us was tightly knit together. My mother stayed uncharacteristically still, smiling down on both of us. Her scent of French perfume, sour milk, and skin that had sweated out a baby draped itself all over us. Her closeness and unsolicited love, combined with the emotions my new sister inspired, brought me to tears. They rolled down my cheeks and gathered in short sobs in my throat. My mother misunderstood, thinking my crying was out of sadness for the new arrival, that I saw June as competition for her affection. She swept my sister out of my arms and against her chest like I was only moments away from chucking the bundle right onto the floor. My mother didn't understand unconditional love. She didn't know what it looked like, smelled like, or felt like. That's why she could never really understand my relationship with June. She was in awe of it as much as she was suspicious of it, fluctuating between believing it was a coup against her and taking it as an example of her superior parenting. No matter her outlook, June and I stayed steadfast in our love for each other. We had to. It was the only way to survive our mother. So those were the initial inspirations for the novel. And as I was plotting it out and trying to figure out what I was going to do with these sisters and whatnot, some personal things started happening for me. And that was that I was experiencing an estrangement from my own mother. And as a result of that, our family cottage was going to be sold. And it's a cottage in Muskoka. And it belonged to my grandparents. And I had spent every summer of my childhood there. I got married in the backyard, and I had brought my own kids there every summer. And my sister and her family came every summer. And my sister brought her kids there as well. And so my own children had grown to love the place as much as I had and my sister had. And then we were faced with losing the cottage. And so it was obviously a very difficult time for me, having an estrangement with my mother, as well as losing the one place that I loved most in the world. And I decided to write that into the book and use writing as a type of cathartic activity. And I also wanted to create a visceral time capsule in the book of all of the details from my own cottage that I didn't want to forget because I wouldn't be able to go back there. So the story is not biographical in any way, but I definitely did write in my own grief. It helped me write the grief that June was experiencing after losing her sister. And, also I was able to relate to the feelings that June had when she had thought as a child she had lost her cottage. And I guess part of me was a little bit wishful in the fact that June got the cottage back in the end. And maybe I'm hopeful that could one day happen for me. So the next excerpt I'll read from the book is just a bit about when June arrives back at the cottage for the first time. This is from her perspective, and she has arrived back to the island on her own. And she's there to grieve her sister and to reclaim the island, so to speak. Arriving in the large clearing where the main cottage sits, I see that she is standing as proudly as she always has. The green paint has peeled away in many places to reveal the raw wood underneath, and the white paint on the windows is now a light gray. There's a slight lean to the front veranda, and patches of shingles peel up and away from the roof, but those are comparable to my own signs of aging, inevitable and forgivable. My chest tightens with nostalgia, and I feel a bit lightheaded. Is it apprehension, excitement, my hangover? It's hard to tell. It kind of feels like a dream. The dreams I used to have as a child in the months after we closed the place when we were back in the city. I ran up this very path, barefoot, still wet from the lake, to burst into the cottage, leaving drops of lake all over the worn wooden floors. Those dreams still came now and again, even after my mother told us she'd sold Avril Island. Less and less frequently as I grew older, but they never disappeared entirely. This place couldn't be exorcised from my subconscious. The wide set of veranda steps groans as I climb them, and I have to kick away a layer of brown leaves to find my footing, inadvertently flaking off big chips of white paint at the same time. The rusty hinges of the screen door scream as I pull it open. As I reach into my pocket and pull out the key I was given, my hand shakes slightly. Surprisingly, the key turns easily in the old lock, and the door swings open wide in welcome. The smell hits me first, before my eyes even have time to adjust to the darkness. It's like a wallop to my chest. Its impact penetrating the bone and tissue, snatching my breath away. The combination of pine, smoky fires, and mustiness acts as an olfactory time capsule, sending me right back to my youth. I breathe deeply as the room comes into focus. All of the furniture is still there in the very same place we left it. The pine board walls still hold our framed family photos, as well as my mother's amateur attempts at painting the surroundings. As I walk slowly through the living room, taking in each detail, the floors snap and creak underfoot, settling into place under my weight as I go. I stop in front of the large stone fireplace. Its hearth is the size of two small children end to end, and its mantle is one long piece of red, grainy wood. Thick gray stones with flecks of sparkle are piled on top of each other to make up the solid structure. It's the backbone of the cottage. Its chimney running right up to the second floor and out onto the roof. Without it, I'm sure the whole place would crumble. It's been 30 years since a fire burned in it, but the smoky scent is still strong. I think of all the fires we sat in front of on rainy days and late August nights when temperatures started to drop. Moving away from the fireplace, I head into the kitchen. It's silent and still, but there's an unnerving sense that somebody has only just ducked out of sight. Like a child playing hide and seek, holding their breath, waiting to be discovered. Nothing in the place has been disturbed. The building hasn't risen up in retaliation for our abandonment and shaken everything about as I almost believed it would. No animals have invaded the place, turning it into their home once our human scent dissipated. The island has kept everything locked up, safe and sound, exactly where it should be, waiting for one of us to make our way back. I will open the cutlery drawer and find the pile of mismatched forks, knives, and spoons lying on a bed of mouse droppings. Some of the pieces have become slightly tarnished, but otherwise they're available for use. The sight of the colorful Fiestaware dishes still neatly stacked in the upper cabinets brings back a lifetime of summer meals in one split second. Leaving the kitchen, I wander into the dining room. French glass doors give me a direct view into the backyard. The large raised garden bed where my mother grew vegetables is now just a mound of dirt and grass that looks like the grave of a giant. The round charcoal barbecue grill on the flagstone patio has tipped over and moss has begun to climb across its metal back, the very same moss that creeps up the legs of the old picnic table. I turn away from the decay to study the well-worn surface of the long harvest table. It's big enough to seat 12, but it was usually just May, my mother, and me who ate at it. My father was away most of the time, and when he was there, he preferred barbecues on the back patio. My sister and I were left to fend for ourselves when it came to breakfast and lunch. The nights my mother didn't go to the resort, she insisted on candlelit dinners after 8 in the dining room. She'd been an only child, raised in a suburb of Paris by 2 alcoholic parents. Her father was a kind drunk, sloppy and slow-moving, but her mother was an abusive one. Alcohol made her angry, suspicious, and quick to strike out. My mother said she was happy to leave France behind. She spoke mostly English, only allowing bits of French to escape now and again. She even protested when my father used the French version of her name, Avril, instead of the English one, April, to name the island, which he bought her as a wedding present. She rejected almost everything about her French heritage, except for the wine and the relaxed, late-night manner of dining. Those nights were always my favorite. We lingered long after dinner. I remember being full from food, but hungry for my mother's attention. The red wine and slow smoking of cigarettes lulled her into a sedentary mood. Laughter at her jokes and requests for her stories were what kept her there. She rarely walked away from a rapt audience. The back doors were thrown open, inviting soft breezes to play in the candlelight and attracting dusty moths to risk their lives in the flames. My mother allowed us small sips of her wine. I pretended to enjoy the bitter sting of it, which seemed to please her. May always gagged and swore she'd never drink when she grew up, which caused my mother to roll her eyes. She'd cast a knowing glance at me as though we were more refined, more mature than May would ever be. Some nights, my mother would reach across the table and take my hand in hers, wrapping her long, cool fingers around my small, hot hand. I'd study the red polish on her nails, the flicker of the candles skittering across the shine of it. She'd rub the back of my hand with her thumb, and I'd stay as still as I could. Even when the friction felt raw against my skin, even then, I wouldn't disturb her touch. The memories of those dinners are loud, as though they're seated around the table calling out to be noticed. As an adult, I suddenly see the wrong in them. The rejection of May because she didn't like the wine my mother so adored. The affection doled out like a prize, nothing unconditional about it. The entire evening a stage for my mother, the two of us her captive audience. I run my hand along the smooth edge of the table as I leave the room, wishing my adult eyes would stop tarnishing my childhood. Now, one thing, for those of you that have read the book, the setting in the book, it actually says, is Vermont. And that's because my publisher is American and they wanted me to give it an American setting, but just between me and Canadians, the setting was the inspiration, the setting that inspired it is actually Muskoka, and that's where my family cottage was. And but again, the landscape in certain parts of Vermont, it's very similar, Lake Champlain. Another inspiration for the book, and one that I get asked quite a bit about and actually wrote an article, is the ghost narrator, which is May. So after May passes away, she becomes one of the narrators. It alternates between May and June's perspective. And one of the reasons that I did this was because, you know, the book was inspired from a car accident where one sister dies, but I needed May's perspective throughout the book. I needed her side of the story. So I decided to use that tool to keep it in. There are other authors who have done that, you know, quite successfully. The Lovely Bones is one of the more well-known examples of that. And you know, I was quite excited to do it as well because I've always been fascinated by ghosts and the spirit world. And as a young child, growing up in one of the old Victorian homes here in Orillia, I experienced lots of sightings of ghosts, feeling them in the room. And as a child, I always thought it was just my overactive imagination. But as an adult, learning what I have, I realized that no, they were actual spirits that I was encountering. And I thought it would be fun to explore the world creatively and have that creative freedom to do what I wanted to do with May as a spirit. I did, at one time, I did go, while I was writing the novel, I went to see a medium. She's actually a local medium. Her name is Moonchild Medium, and she's amazing. And I went to her to consult with her about what I was trying to write, and if I was, you know, if she had any insight to give me or any help on creating this world, this spirit character in the spirit world. And she was very helpful. So she had a part for sure in helping me create my ghost protagonist. And again, her name is Moonchild Medium. I highly recommend booking a reading with her if you can. So I'll do one more reading, just the description of May when she's learning what it is to be dead and to be the ghost that it is seemingly attached to her younger sister June. And again, just a point of interest, I in my original version, I wrote it a little bit differently, but my editor had me change some things to help with the story and help drive the story. You know, May had to have some memory missing. She had to be unclear about certain things. And so I had to work that into my portrayal of what she was experiencing after passing on to the other side. And so this is May's perspective. I don't know if all dead people are assigned to just one person. It makes sense, though, that I'm assigned to June. Basically, I was assigned to her the day she was born, and now that she's dead, she's the one I haunt. Being dead isn't as bad as everyone imagines. It's lonely in some ways, but peaceful, and there's a contentment that comes with it that you've searched for all through life, but never found. Perhaps because in so many ways we spend our lives running from death, so when it finally comes, we have no choice but to accept it. Gone are the fear, the avoidance, and the desperation that living so often brings. No more insecurities, guilt, shame, or regrets. There's just no point to them anymore. Full memories have disappeared for me as well. My entire life presenting like a fuzzy dream that happened in the course of one restless sleep. I know who the main players were and have some sense of myself, but can't gather together the full details of actual events that made up my lifetime. The only clear memory I have is of the moment of my death, and I try my best to avoid reliving that one. My time, which feels simultaneously endless and momentary, is split between the living realm and floating in a beautiful abyss of nothingness. A sea of total darkness with small bursts of light throughout, and no definite definition between me and the nothingness. I am as much a part of it as it is of me. I'm peaceful in this nothingness, but there's a sense of limbo, as though I'm in some kind of ethereal waiting room until the universe has decided I'm ready for the next stage. At times, undetermined by me, I slip from the nothingness into the living realm. There, just by thinking it, I'm able to move from one spot in the room to another, where I spread into things or hang in the air like dust particles. I'm aimless and powerless, but there's this feeling that I'm there to do something, and I just don't know what it is yet. When I'm in the living realm, memories appear in my consciousness like scheduled commercial breaks, unbidden and determined by something outside of me, as though it's all part of a greater plan, one that I have yet to be made aware of. This is death, knowing all and knowing nothing at once. So those were the main inspirations for the novel, and just some excerpts that sort of give you an idea of how they played out. Another thing that I'm asked about quite frequently is my path to publication. And I always wrote, even as a child, starting from the age when I knew what a story was, I started writing them. And I had bouts where I wrote more than other times, and there were some years where I didn't write at all. And in my 20s in Toronto, when I was living in Toronto, I went I took some courses at George Brown College. And then after that, I took a year course at the Humber School for Writers. And I kept at it. And I also volunteered with the Canadian Authors Association, the Simcoe Leacock branch, which was here in Orillia. I did that for a few years, and I met a lot of great people, and I met a lot of writers and editors, and I learned a lot through that process. And while I was doing that, I was working on a novel. And at one of the writing conferences that were put on by the Canadian Authors Association, I actually got an agent, a literary agent, which is pretty necessary when you want to be published these days. You need an agent first, and then they will submit your work to publishers. And so I started a YA novel. And at this conference, I got an agent who was interested in it. I worked on that novel for about 3 years and wrote about 7 revisions. And then it was submitted to publishers, many publishers, and nobody wanted it. And so that was pretty devastating for me. But I'm actually happy now, because I don't think that the YA genre is my forte, so to speak. So to make myself feel better, I wrote another novel. This time I decided to try in the thriller genre, the adult domestic thriller genre. And I also got a new agent who I thought was more suited to this new novel. And she had other clients. Her name is Carolyn Ford, and she works at the Transatlantic Agency. And I found out about her in the acknowledgements of a thriller novel that I read and enjoyed. And I queried her, and she liked the novel. And so I started a whole new chapter of writing with her. And so this domestic thriller was submitted, and nobody wanted that either. So I decided to write another novel. And this seems to be the case with so many writers, so many published writers. Their debut novel is by no means their first novel. They've written, I know some writers who've written up to 12 before they actually found a publisher for one. So 3 is not a terrible number, even though at the time it felt like it was. I wrote What You Never Knew. I started it in January 2019, and I took a little bit of a break. And then when I found out that my other novel was not getting picked up, I decided to throw myself into the writing of this one. And so May 2019, I really dedicated myself to it, and I had the first draft finished by the end of August 2019. I did a few months of revision with my agent, and well, more than a few months. And then in March 2020, my agent said, okay, we're good to submit it. I think it's ready. And we sent it out for submission. And 2 days later, the entire world shut down with COVID. And so that was quite disheartening and worrisome at the time. I thought, great, no one's going to buy a book when we have a global pandemic and no one can leave their house. So I was worried for a bit, but by June, things had started rolling again, and I was offered a deal with Crooked Lane Books for this particular novel. And so that's essentially my story of publication. I, wrote 3 novels. The third one was published, and it was just essentially a matter of not giving up. And I think that's essentially the best advice for any writer who wants to pursue traditional publishing. Is you just have to keep going at it. You have to take criticism from other people, learn to absorb it, and to turn it into something constructive for yourself. So I would love to open the floor now to any questions that people might have. So I think Jane is going to pop back on and be the one to read those questions.
Anybody have any comments or questions? You can either put them in the chat, or you can turn your camera and mic back on and ask them. Okay. Hi, Jessica. I really enjoyed your book.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I thought there might be a question with it, but.
And then someone else wrote, congrats. What comments have you got from family and friends?
Well, I mean, my friends and family are great, very supportive. And I have found that the community in Orillia has also been very supportive. Many people have bought my book and messaged me about it, and have been really great to me. And my family, they've always supported my writing, and they've always told me to keep going. There are quite a few times where I wanted to give up, and they wouldn't let me. So yeah, my friends and family are great when it comes to my writing, and they've been especially supportive and excited for me with the book too.
That's great. Anyone else have anything? I also enjoyed reading your book. It was in audio format. Awesome job writing the book.
Thank you.
Were you able to do any sort of live readings or anything with COVID kind of coming and going, like in between lockdowns? Or, yeah, probably not.
Well, that's all I've done really. I've only done virtual things. I haven't done anything live at all, unfortunately. I know in the States, a lot of authors have started doing live events, but we're just not there quite yet. So yeah, unfortunately I haven't, but hopefully I will soon.
Hopefully, and we'll definitely get the library once we can.
Yeah.
Someone else, I like the details you include, such as describing a plate, etc.
Oh, thank you. That's what I enjoy when reading. I really enjoy description and being completely immersed in the setting. So I think that influences my writing, definitely.
For sure. What is next?
Well, I'm actually working on the revision of the manuscript, the domestic thriller that didn't get picked up. I feel like I've learned quite a bit from this process, and so I'm going to revise that, and I've also started another novel in the same genre with a paranormal element to it as well.
Okay. My other comment was that writing May as a ghost felt so real, how June felt her prompts and thinking she heard her voice. May I ask what the medium, Moonchild medium, suggested that affected May's parts in the story?
Well, I already had quite a substantial idea for May and for the feeling that June would have with her around. I wanted June to be skeptical, which she was, not necessarily know that it was May, and sort of keep convincing herself it wasn't. And I mostly went to ask, if my description of death, if that idea of limbo and of it being a wonderful, peaceful place would fit well, if I could move ahead with that. I wanted to stay away from anything too religious. I wanted to keep it sort of vague so that people could, impose their own beliefs on it, if that worked for them. And so Moonchild medium, she sort of just verified what I said, confirmed things. She gave me some examples of what she had been told by spirit about what it was like for them, and so yeah, that's pretty much how her consultation went with me.
Cool. Someone else, Susan, I am enjoying the book. I am about 75% of the way through. I think you do a great job describing how the characters of May and June are feeling. It's very expressive.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Anybody else? We do have it at the library. I know there's been a lot of holds on it, so I haven't read it yet, but I can't wait because it's my kind of book. So I'm really excited to get my hands on it.
Yeah, I'm also going to donate. I have the audio version of it. I was sent copies of that, the CD with the CD. So I would like to donate a copy of that as well to the library, so that there'll be that there soon.
Awesome. And as I mentioned earlier, it is available just through Manticore, Amazon, or Indigo. You can just order it like you would any other book. And I may just do that because it sounds like a book that I might read again. So
oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So anyone else before we say goodnight to Jessica? I think that might be it. But thank you so much. It was really awesome. And I'm excited to have you back. And like I said, hopefully in person. Because
no, I would love that. I would love to come and talk about writing in person and meet readers.
For sure. Someone saying thank you. And
thank you.
And I thank everybody for popping by and visiting with us tonight. And
me too.
Keep safe. I think that's it. So thank you so much, Jessica, and take care.
Thank you for having me.
We will be in touch at some point soon. Okay, good night, everybody.